Hello students, welcome you all to my video lectures. I have given one lecture on periods of English literature. Students requested me to provide some video lectures on various centuries. It's a quite difficult task, but I have tried that at least in a very nutshell. I'll tell you the important historical events and the literary tendencies of a particular age. So let us now start with 14th century, which is the age of Chaucer. Now, in this video lecture, I'll discuss three. The video is going to be very short. I'll discuss three important points. Number one, historical events of age of Chaucer, and some literary tendencies of the age of Chaucer, and the contemporaries of Chaucer. Now, coming to the important historical events of 14th century. Now, these are the five important events of 14th century. Number one is beginning of 100 Years War with France. Number two is Black Death. Number three is beginning of the Lollard movement. Number four is Peasants Revolt. Number five is use of English in schools, law courts, and the parliament. Now, whenever you are going to discuss 14th century literature, especially the writings of Chaucer, I think you have to keep in your mind these historical events. Chaucer, I'll discuss later, is called the chronicle of his age, and you'll find out the reference of all these events in his writing. Now, so these are the five important events of 14th century. As I have told you, beginning of 100 Years War with France, Black Death, beginning of the Lollard movement, Peasants Revolt, use of English in schools, law courts, and the parliament. Now, what is this 100 Years War? Now, I have seen that many times in UGC net examination and also in other competitive examinations, the factual question related to 100 Years War were asked. Now, this 100 Years War was a long struggle between England and France. You have to keep in mind, this 100 Years War was a long struggle. It continued for a long period of time, and it was between England and France. And what for it was there? It was for succession to the French throne. It lasted from 1337 to 1453. You just remember these dates, 1332 to 1453. And this is the period of 116 years. So you just better call it 116 Years War, though we call it the 100 Years War, but it continued for 116 years. What you find in this 100 Years War, that under the able and warlike guidance of King Edward III, who reigned England from 1327 to 1377, England won a number of glorious victories. I would like to mention the name of Crecy and Agincourt. Now, the French felt very poor before Edward III, and it was acknowledged at that time that Edward III was actually the King of France. But what did we find later? That after his demise and after the succession of another king, that Richard II, we find that Richard II was quite incompetent, and England became, less powerful in the reign of Richard, II. Now, two important developments which we find after 100 Years War. Number one was that it created in English people the strong nationalist fervor, the patriotic fervor. It was one important point which we find after the 100 Years War, that fostering of nationalistic sentiments. And the second was the demolition of some social barriers between different classes of society. So this was actually 100 Years War. Now, coming to Black Death, a very important historical event of 14th century, of the age of Chaucer. You please remember the date, 1348 to 49. This is very often asked in the examination. Now, the Black Death ravaged England during 1348-49. It was a plague epidemic called Black Death because death was caused by black boils on the body. It was the region actually that black boils were found on the body of the victim, and the victim died. During this time, you were having the havoc of coronavirus. Similarly, it was there was a kind of plague epidemic during 1348-49, and it shattered completely the social and economic structure of the contemporary England. Now, it was called Black Death because it was more, terrible than death, and it ravaged almost half the population. It is a significant historical event of Chaucer's time. Now, coming to another important historical event, that is, Peasants' Revolt. Now, one immediate consequence of this plague, this pestilence, was the acute shortage of the working hands. The socio-economic system of England was, paralyzed because of so many people died. Actually, billions of people died. Now, laborers who happened to survive, they started demanding for higher wages. But neither their employers nor the king nor the parliament, they were not ready to meet these demands. A number of severe regulations were passed asking workers to work at the old rates of payment, and this was the main cause of the resentment of the laborers, which culminated in the form of Peasants' Revolt in 1381, and it happened during the reign of Richard II. You have to keep it in mind. Now, this Peasants' Revolt, which is also sometimes called Wat Tyler's Rebellion, because he played a very important role. This Peasants' Revolt was actually the result, the aftermath of the Black Death, the resentment of the laborers, the pagans, and it was the great rebellion in English history. And its main cause was the imposition of the unpopular poll tax, and it happened in the year 1381. This again date is very important. Now, you see, I just told you that dissatisfied with the ruling classes and the corruption of the clergy, the people stormed London, led by Wat Tyler, Jack Straw, and John Hall. These are three leaders. You please remember the names. Now, the latter advocated the famous doctrine. This is the famous line which was used by John Hall. You please keep it in your mind. Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman. This is also asked sometimes in the examination. Now, coming to another important event, that is Lollard movement. John Wycliffe and his followers were called Lollards. This is in simple words. John Wycliffe, one of the contemporaries of Chaucer, John Wycliffe and his followers were called Lollards. Now, they taught what they believed to be the true Christianity. They were against the papal degeneracy of the Christ and of church, of the church, and they promoted only those teachings of the church that found sanction in the Bible. Now, the teachings of these Lollards continued until the Reformation. You will find out the Reformation movement, Reformation of the Reformation regarding the corruption which was prevalent in the church. You'll find out in Chaucer's prologue that how ecclesiastical characters, how church characters are corrupt and morally, degraded. So Lollard, this was the Lollard movement. Now, these were the 4-5 important historical events. Now, coming to the chief features of the age of Chaucer. Now, when you come to the age of Chaucer, you'll find out that it witnessed the rise of English language, and a curious modern note began to appear during this period. This modern note you'll find out in the form of Renaissance later on, and it marked a break with the Middle Ages. Now, there are four important characteristics which you'll find out in the age of Chaucer. Number one is the rise of national consciousness. Number two is the corruption in the church. Number three is decline of feudal system. Number four is rise of middle class and progress of trade. Number five is an advancement towards new learning, ultimately leading to the Renaissance. These are the five important features of the age of Chaucer. Now, who are the important contemporaries of Chaucer? I'll make another video on these contemporaries of Chaucer. These are the four important contemporaries of Chaucer. One is William Langland, then we have Mandeville, then we have John Gower, and then we have John Wycliffe. Now, in this short video lecture, what we have learned is that the five important uh, uh, historical events of Chaucer's time. Number one is Hundred Years' War. I have told you this war between England and France. Number two is Black Death, which happened in 1348 to 49. Then we have Peasants Revolt, which happened during the reign of Richard II in the year 1381. And then we have the Lollard movement, a movement John Wycliffe and his followers were called Lollards. Then I discussed the chief features of the age of Chaucer, five important features I told you, and then these are the four important contemporaries of Chaucer. Thank you very much.